안녕하십니까. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Now we will begin our Ifans International Symposium. First of all, on behalf of the Ifans, the organizer of today's symposium, I would like to extend my sincere appreciation to all of you for joining us today. As you see, today we are dealing with a very important issue, and the middle power diplomacy of Korea. At the opening session, already you've listened from our minister about the policy direction in terms of middle power diplomacy, and you already have basic knowledge and understanding on the Korea's middle power diplomacy. And particularly, I'm very pleased to have this big audience today. From the Ifans point of view of Ifans, I'm so pleased to have Ifans has so many fans. So I would say the middle power diplomacy is one of the three key pillars of Korean foreign policy, and the incumbent Park Geun-hye government's foreign policy, together with, as you may know, the trust-building process on the Korean Peninsula and Northeast Asia Peace and Cooperation Initiative, and middle power diplomacy. As a responsible member of the global community, the Korean government wishes to make contribution for the development and the peace and development of the global village and global community. So Park Geun-hye government has strong will to make that kind of contribution. And as Minister Yoon introduced, on the margin of the UN General Assembly last September, the 5 foreign ministers from Korea, Mexico, Indonesia, Turkey, and Australia launched a consultation mechanism, as Minister Yoon described, informal, very flexible, the consultation cooperation group or a mechanism. So on the occasion of the launching of MIKTA, and we were planning this symposium, inviting the very prominent scholars, experts, and diplomats. We are going to discuss all about middle power diplomacy, as well as specifically Korean middle power diplomacy. So as a moderator, I would like to introduce all the panelists of today. And today we have really an excellent composition of panelists from MIKTA countries, in fact. The seating arrangement is in alphabetical order of the names of the panelists. So I would like to introduce from my neighbor, Dr. Akhunei. And he's, at this moment, he's advisor of Middle East Technical University of Turkey, and he was former Turkish ambassador to China and Canada. So he is a scholar turned diplomat turned to scholar. And then next to him, I would like to introduce Director General Gonzalo Canseco from Mexico. He's at this moment Director General for Policy Planning of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Mexico, and he was former Chief of Staff at the Mexican Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And he got his PhD in Oxford University. And then next is Dean Dr. Jemadu from Indonesia. At this moment, he is Dean of School of Government and Global Affairs, University of 펠리타하라판대 in Jakarta, Indonesia. And he has been the professor in that school for a long time. And then we have His Excellency Ambassador Patterson Australian ambassador to Korea. And I'm appreciate his joining us today and from Seoul. And then we have Professor Lee Dong-hui, the most senior professor of Korean National Diplomat Academy. And so we have a fantastic combination of panelists today. Before start, I would like to, for the management of today's roundtable discussion, because of the limitation of time, I would like to, all the panelists should be very succinct and concise and very effective way of communications. So I would ask about 10 minutes of presentation, and then we have some sort of internal discussion, and then wrapping up our roundtable discussion, and then we will have question and answer session from directly from the audience. We were talking about the subtopics of today's symposium. So it would be composed overall of 3 parts, and all the panelists first would give the presentation, make presentation about those 3 or 4 questions. First one is, what is the middle power diplomacy, overall diplomacy itself? And in a theoretical basis or any kind of, what's the impact, what's the middle power diplomacy or middle power, what's the condition, what's the requirement? And then we would listen from each panelist about the policy goals or practices and cases of each country. And then we go over to the assessment of Korean, the middle power diplomacy, the assessment from outside views. And then finally, we would talk about what we could do together, particularly among the MIKTA countries. What could we do together as a MIKTA countries, and at the same time as a larger group as well. So those overall 4 questions, the sub-subjects we are going to deal with today. Then we will start our roundtable discussion. First, I would like to ask all the panelists then please make presentation about 10 minutes each. And if you go over and exceed 10 minutes, then immediately I will wave this pen. Then it means you finalize, wrap up your presentation within 1 minute. Okay? This is not a red card, but very beautiful fan. Then we will start from my neighbor, Dr. Akrunai, from the point of view of the Turkey.
감사합니다. I'm going to first let me thank you for this excellent symposium that you have arranged. I have to thank to you personally and as well as to the Institute of Foreign Affairs and National Security of MIKTA의. We are going to discuss the middle power, but what makes the middle power? Is it a new concept? Actually, when we look at the history, we see that the middle power concept is not a new one. It has the focus of, although the focus of international affairs, international politics has always been on the great powers, it was a common concept that was referred at during the Cold War years, and as the minister has already pointed out, even long before then, centuries before then. During the Cold War years, priority was given when we talked about the middle powers to international security. Almost all of them were located in the West. They were statu quo orders, states, and most of them were allies, victors of previous war, Second World War. However, during the post-Cold War, we see that the outsiders also started playing a role in the world more and more, and they are started being called as middle powers. Most of the middle powers today, however, are G20 members. Maybe not all of them, but most of them are G20 members. And increasing attention is given to societal concentrations at global level, unlike the Cold War years, unlike those years when the focus of attention was on security. Middle power may be defined as a key state that is able and willing to project power and influence developments beyond its borders, regionally and internationally, want to determine the fate of its region to a certain extent, and active involvement in security issues if needed, such as peacekeeping and peacemaking operations, and also leading role with regard to regional economic development and integration. If we want to give a couple of examples of the middle powers or the organization of the middle powers of today, we can, for instance, talk about IBSA, which is India, Belgium, yes, Brazil, South Africa, to reform the United Nations Security Council. We can talk about New Agenda Coalition of 6-7 countries about nuclear issues, and the Middle Power Initiative, focusing on the elimination of nuclear weapons, and various organizations are coalesced in this Middle Power Initiative. When we look at the characteristics and commonalities of contemporary middle powers, we see that geographically they are regional. They are not global. They have different regional problems and they have different domestic problems, each of them. When we look at their economic performance, their market size is quite not as big as the global powers, but not small. They receive considerable foreign direct investments, and their trade figures are increasing more and more every year. As far as the size is concerned, again, they have a considerable size area-wise and population-wise. Diplomatically, they are capable of bridging activities among different countries, especially at regional level. Some of them have, considerable hard power as well, and almost all of them, not almost all of them, are against the proliferation of nuclear weapons. Now, why the middle powers started emerging as such in our times? There are certain features of evolving international scene. One of them is the global dispersal of power, the ascendance of regionalism and regionalization, growing presence of non-state actors, NGOs. In a rapidly changing world, power, authority, and wealth are diffusing from traditional centers to a wider sphere. The benefits are increasingly shared, and the countries are started taking more responsibility, these middle power countries. And in this environment, in this international scene, emerging regional actors are gaining prominence in many areas in order to build a stable environment, to contribute to the effective functioning of the multilateral order, and to address shortcomings of global governance. And we need, why? Because we need more cooperation and more coordination. Against this background, MIKTA has come into being as well. In other words, the MIKTA countries came together with the need to cooperate, to coordinate, and to work constructively with each other and other states in the face of global and regional challenges or global governance which concern us all. MIKTA is composed of important regional actors, and it is not a new bloc. I have to underline this. But MIKTA is about complementarity, not competition. The 5 countries participating in the MIKTA, Mexico, Indonesia, Korea, Turkey, and Australia, are a diverse group. They share core values, face similar challenges, they have open economies, they enjoy democratic pluralistic systems, strategically located, all of them, and strongly linked to surrounding regions in all aspects. They have dynamic economies with strong growth rates. They show an interest in strengthening multilateralism, supporting global efforts and stability and prosperity, and facilitating pragmatic, creative solutions to regional and, if needed, global challenges. It is based on cooperation which will be informal, flexible, and issues-driven. The focus is on sharing views and exchanging information rather than on agreeing on joint positions. Now, after giving these facts or this theoretical framework, you can understand why Turkey and Mexico has become middle powers. Because both of us in our region, we challenge certain problems, certain issues. In Northeastern Asia, you know how the strategic situation is. For Turkey, we have Middle East on our borders. And when I talk about the Middle East, as you may know, there are more than one issue, like the Israeli-Palestinian issue, the Arab Spring, Syria, Iraq, Iran, you name it. And in the Balkans, in the Caucasus, we have the same problem. And as Korea is trying to do in your region, Turkey is also very active in the Middle East and beyond, in Africa, in Central Asia, and try to bridge all these countries together. Before, for example, the recent developments had taken place, Turkey has brought Syria and Israel together, and they were almost reaching an agreement, and because of some reasons among themselves, they gave up. Turkey has been active in all these areas. We have now what we call joint cabinet meetings with 15 countries in our region, with all our neighbors, with almost all our neighbors, and with the others in the area. And our ministers come together, that's a Turkish initiative, and sign certain agreements and discuss the issues. Black Sea Cooperation Organization is a Turkish initiative. Black Sea Force is a Turkish initiative. We can go on giving certain other examples. I'm trying to be a little bit fast. Soft power, as far as economy is concerned, Korea and Turkey is almost in the same line, although in some areas, Korea is ahead of Turkey, and in some, Turkey is a little bit better, doing a bit better in Korea. But the GDP is growing in both countries. Turkey today is the 18th largest economy. It is an emerging donor country, and last year we were number 4 in the world, as well as the humanitarian aid assistance is considered in the world. Industrial development is going up. Tourism, we receive 30 million tourists, more than 30 million every year. And I mentioned about the diplomatic encounters. We have both Korea and Turkey. Hard power is important in our region and globally because of the strategic challenges that we have. Now, just last sentence. We are talking so many groupings among the Middle East, middle powers. So we have to think whether is there a proliferation of groupings, and we have to take into consideration that these groupings should not lead to division within other groupings like G20. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Akhunai. As his background of the scholars and professors, advisor to the university, his presentation is a little bit based on some theoretical background of the origin of the middle power diplomacy, or the overall historical and chronological the process of the middle power diplomacy has been developed. And then we will go to change the continent from Middle East to Latin America, and we will go to Mexico. And I would like to ask Dr. Canseco, Director General Canseco, about your point of view.
Thank you. Good evening to everybody. Thank you very much, Professor Hongji. And I'd like to start by expressing my heartfelt gratitude to the Institute of Foreign Affairs and National Security and to the Korea National Diplomatic Academy for organizing this symposium and for allowing me the privilege of taking part in it. I hope that what I have to say will not appear at times to be too close, too repetitive to what has already been said so aptly, so eloquently by Professor Akhunai. My purpose today is to share with you some ideas from Mexico's perspective concerning middle power diplomacy, and later on I think we will speak specifically about Korea's important role in this area. First of all, I think, as Professor Akhunai rightly did, we should start by clarifying what we're talking about when we address the issue of middle power diplomacy. I got the feeling, as I was reviewing my notes, that in a way our countries have already been doing this for some time. It's like that character in Molière's play, the bourgeois gentilhomme, who discovers to his surprise that he has been speaking prose all his life without knowing it. I think some of our countries have been doing middle power diplomacy for some time, and I hope that what I have to say will bear this out. What makes a country a middle power? I think the short answer is fairly straightforward. It has to do with its relative position in the international system. A middle power stands at an intermediate point in a progressive scale on the basis of a series of attributes that may include population, economic weight, political influence, and to some extent military capability. So in one sense it's relatively easy to point out which countries have the characteristics that make them potential middle powers. I think as a second, more nuanced approach would focus on normative aspects. I think this is perhaps closer to the notion of constructive powers. It's the idea that middle powers, given their relative position in the international system, are more inclined to seek to influence rather than to attempt to impose or to cajole as other stronger powers are able to do. They are reputedly, I'm referring to middle powers, less selfish, more willing to build mutually beneficial agreements when taking responsibility for the creation and maintenance of the global order. So this is a related concept. It's linked to what we conceive as middle power diplomacy, but it has not necessarily to do with their position, but rather with the way they behave. And finally, a third approach that I think is relevant to identify middle powers has to do with the way they behave. And in my view, these powers tend to pursue multilateral solutions to collective problems. They embrace compromise positions more easily than other powers, and they tend to talk, as we heard today, about a responsible foreign policy, a foreign policy that is aware of the needs of other countries and that is willing to reconcile with those points of view. Also, in addition to this general overview, I think the behavior of middle powers follows three clear patterns. In some way, middle powers act as catalysts. They provide the intellectual and political energy to trigger an initiative and often take the lead in gathering followers around it. They also act, and this has already been mentioned, as facilitators. They focus on agenda setting and engage in some form of collaborative and coalitional activities. Their central technique consists of coalition building on issue-specific questions. And finally, they often act as managers, emphasizing institution building, the creation of formal organizations or regimes, and helping to develop conventions and norms. So this is what I would add to complement what has already been said about the characteristics of middle powers. Now, in order to be effective, I think middle power diplomacy has to bring together certain conditions. First of all, I think the country must have a certain level of capacity to influence events. That is to say, they must have the diplomatic tools that allow them to effectively promote their values, their goals in the international arena. And often that means that you have to have a certain infrastructure, and I think Korea clearly has that characteristic, and so do the other members of MIKTA. A second element, in addition to capacity, is creativity. I think middle powers, given the relative position in the system, must be more creative, must find ways of influencing events in a relatively weaker position. So intellectual leadership becomes very important. Being able to get the support of think tanks, of research, of in-depth analysis that allow them to have to stand a better chance of influencing events. A third characteristic has to do with credibility. I think middle powers must be able to present themselves in a consistent and reliable way, precisely because their influence has to do or is based on the way they are perceived. And finally, and I think I've already touched on this, middle powers have to work on the basis of coalitions. They must be able to bring other actors on board to support their positions. Otherwise, their efforts will be ineffective. So network building is essential, and I think this lies at the heart of the creation of MIKTA, which consists effectively in a new network. It's as Professor Akrunai has already stated, it's a flexible mechanism. It's informal and it's issue-driven, but it is in effect a network that will enable each individual country to bring together not only its individual positions, but also the views from their own region, and to pull their resources together. I think that the current time is very propitious for the activities of middle powers. I think we are seeing, I'm sure you are well aware of the changes that are going on in the international system. There is a rebalance of power around the world. To some extent, there's the decline of former powers and the rise or the emergence of new powers, both economically and in the political arena. And I think this opens up new possibilities for middle powers to play a more active role in the international scene. This, of course, is the result of the way the international system has evolved since the end of the Cold War. But at the same time that it has raised new challenges, it opens up, as I said, new opportunities for the activities of middle power. So I think I would leave it at that at the moment, and I'll touch on other subjects later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Director General Canseco. You are very functional. Exactly 10 minutes. You spent 10 minutes. Thank you so much. And I think Director General Canseco was involved in the planning of launching the MIKTA because he is in charge of the policy planning of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Mexico. So his presentation more or less based on the policy-oriented opinion. Then I would say the middle power countries not necessarily mean a medium-sized country or somewhere located in the middle of some places, but the concept is the countries that could be play some role as a bridging, as a foreign minister mentioned that glue diplomacy, the word glue diplomacy, but some very significant role and contribute in very substantive ways. That's the concept of the middle powers. But in fact, if we see the old MIKTA countries, the location of each country is very strategic. And Turkey and Mexico, Indonesia, Australia, Korea. Korea is the center of Northeast Asia. And Mexico is in the middle of American continent. And so we see, I think it's very coincidentally the location of all middle power countries are located in the middle of some geopolitically important location. Then I would like to ask Dean Jemadu from Indonesia about, I believe he would focus rather on what's the policy goals and the case of Indonesia. Dr. Jemadu, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, and I would like to thank Ifans for inviting me to this very important symposium on middle power diplomacy. We are limited by time, and we are also limited by the questions sent to us by the committee, so I want to stick to those questions that have been sent to us. My approach is a bit different from my Turkish colleague, maybe a bit more inductive in the sense that I try to be more down to earth, reflecting Indonesia's particular experience in order to see how Indonesia's identity as a middle power, constructive power, is constructed very much based on its particular experience in order to understand how the diversity of the politics, level of development among these middle powers. So, in order to respond to the questions, what makes a country a middle power and what are the necessary conditions for middle power diplomacy to succeed, I think the first criteria as far as Indonesia is concerned is regional leadership. Yeah. So the middle power like Indonesia is considered as such because it has a bigger size and population compared to other countries in the same region. So for instance, Indonesia has the largest size in Southeast Asia and also in terms of population, and therefore it is perceived as the traditional leader in the region. And I believe the same criterion can also be applied for Brazil in South America and Turkey in the Middle East. So it is very important to to see how each of these middle powers play their leading role in their respective region. This is the first factor. The second is, I think, it is also related to its economic position. Like your country here, Korea, I think it is an important member of G20 due to the fact that your economy contributes significantly to the global economy as a whole. And as far as Indonesia is concerned, you see that Indonesia is an indispensable partner as far as economic integration in Southeast Asia is concerned. So as the largest economy in Southeast Asia, Indonesia plays a leading role in the process of economic integration of ASEAN, especially with the establishment of ASEAN Economic Community in 2015, 2 years from now. And the third factor is a country can be seen as a middle power if historically it has played a mediatory role in resolving conflict between countries in the same region. And such role is commonly accepted and even sought by other countries. On top of that, it also becomes a source of new ideas and initiatives to enhance regional cooperation for the benefits of all members. So the country exercised an intellectual leadership that is recognized not only by other countries in the region, but also by external great powers. So I think as far as Indonesia is concerned, this criteria fits very well into the role that it is playing now. Yeah, it plays a mediatory role, not only in territorial conflict in South China Sea, but also it played a mediatory role in the southern Philippines and also conflict between Thai and Cambodia. So they are generally active in their respective region. And the fourth factor, I think it is also important for a middle power is categorized as such if great powers recognize the importance of its role in the region to keep regional stability. Because if you think that these middle powers should act as a bridge between the small states and the great powers, I think we have to be realistic. We need the recognition by the great powers. In order to be more concrete, United States and China should recognize you as a middle power in order to, for you to be effective in playing your leadership role in the region. I give you an example. For instance, in Southeast Asia, I think United States and China also recognize the important role of Indonesia in order to keep the region stable in terms of politics, in terms of security, and also in terms of economy. That way, your middle power diplomacy will have a good chance to succeed. And next is middle powers also play a key role in the process of economic recovery from the global crisis. I mean, your contribution in the recovery of the crisis for global economy is recognized. And I believe that the role of Korea is widely recognized as an important player due to the economic success that you have achieved. And then the conditions for middle power diplomacy to succeed, it has to show a combination of long-term political stability, but within the framework of democracy and human rights. Why we have to underline that? Because if you are not democratic and if you become the target of criticism by international actors in terms of your performance in human rights, then you will become very vulnerable in this era of democratization. So I think as far as middle powers are concerned, it is very important to emphasize their identity as democratic power. And I believe one thing that makes your country, Korea here, is interesting is that you achieve your economic success within the framework of democracy. And that is what we are trying to emulate, to reproduce in Indonesia. How to achieve economic growth, how to achieve success in industrialization, but within the framework of democracy, meaning that you appreciate the role of your people, you appreciate their fundamental rights, yeah, in order to develop their potentiality in building the economy. And I believe members of middle powers have this in common, that they are democratic countries, they achieve economic growth within that political framework. And as I said earlier, the country also should be perceived as playing a leading role by the great powers in order to help you to bridge the small states and the great powers. And also very important, middle powers, especially these 5 members of MIKTA, should have a strong intentionality to play such role. Otherwise, it is very difficult to convince the international community that you have something positive to contribute to the effectiveness of global governance institutions. And then next, we are also asked to make assessment of Korea's middle power diplomacy. I think around the world, your role as middle power is well recognized, and it is very much related to the fact that Korea is a successful model of export-led growth strategy of economic development and technological progress. And as an industrial powerhouse in East Asia, Korea remains seeks to build a foreign policy that is commensurate or in line with your economic power. But of course, we have a problem of our brothers in the north. An increasingly belligerent and nuclearized North Korea remains the biggest concern in this peninsula. However, South Korea's policy choices in dealing with North Korea are still constrained by the competing strategies of China and the United States. Korea's identity as middle power is very much related to its unique position, in the sense that there is a success of combining the economic success and also democracy. And last, about things that or issues that MIKTA powers can do together, I think very much related to the fact that they are unique
in the sense that some of them are already industrialized, like Korea and Australia. Some of them are still developing. So one important issue that they can work together is to develop models of poverty eradication or globalization strategies. We have a lot of things to tell other countries how to globalize in the economy, but at the same time, you don't sacrifice your poor people. But then also there is the issue of interfaith dialogue, yeah? Considering the diversity of these MIKTA powers, there is Turkey, Indonesia, Korea, Australia. I think interfaith dialogue can also be an important issue. And I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Jimad. I think you stressed, you underscored the mediatory and leadership role of the middle powers. And it's the key elements of middle power diplomacy. Thank you so much. And then I would like to ask His Excellency Ambassador Patterson. I understand Ambassador Patterson has an expertise not only in middle power diplomacy as well as public diplomacy. And, you were joining the another symposium a couple of days ago about middle powers and public diplomacy, I understand. So from the point of view you're stationed in Korea, I think you are well aware of the policy directions of Korean government. Ambassador, please.
Thank you, Chairman Hong. It's an honor to be here today. As Chairman Hong said, I participated in a very similar discussion under the chairmanship of the Korea Foundation last week, the Korea Foundation Annual Global Seminar. And I'm struck today that there is really only so much you can say about middle power diplomacy, and much of it's already been said, so I hope I don't duplicate too much. Certainly, there's been a lot of discussion in Korea in particular, I think, for some time. Middle power status has been a preoccupation here, and in some other self-described middle powers for some years. And that, of course, has now emerged in the form of MIKTA. But let me go back and do something other speakers have said. What in my view, or my government's view, constitutes a middle power? Let me offer a few thoughts. I think there are probably at least 6 characteristics, and we've spoken of some of these before. Economic weight. Political power derives from economic substance and military substance, but more importantly, how this is applied in terms of capability. Secondly, I think a readiness to engage internationally and actively to lead in support of both national interests and issues related to global order. Thirdly, of course, membership of, but more importantly, contribution to, not only the UN, but of the WTO, the IMF, World Bank, and regional and multilateral bodies. Fourthly, it's important, I think, that we have shared values and institutions that underpin this, values and institutions which lend credibility to advocacy and present attractive models, if you like, our soft power assets. Fifthly, that we are significant trading nations, that we are liberal and open societies. And finally, of course, to be effective middle powers, we need some national capability in terms of political leadership, diplomatic skills, and a diplomatic network. You'd expect me as ambassador to Korea to focus a little on Australia and Korea. Why do we both fit those criteria? Well, I think we fit all those criteria. In terms of gross domestic product, Australia ranks 12th in the world, and the ROK ranks 15th. So we're roughly equivalent sized economies. Both are active, for instance, as providers of development assistance, and both contribute to United Nations peacekeeping operations. And we serve together, for instance, in Afghanistan as well. Both are members of the G20 and of the OECD. Both are currently non-permanent members of the United Nations Security Council because both of us want to make a broader international contribution. We share broad areas of agreement across the international agenda, such as a commitment to non-proliferation and disarmament, to human rights, and to a rules-based international order. Both of us are active in the East Asia Summit and APEC in this region, but our key national interests and engagement extend well beyond that, to the Middle East, for instance, and way beyond that as well. But neither Korea nor Australia has a natural constituency such as the EU or ASEAN to support us. So MIKTA has value for us in this context as well. Both of us, I think, in our own ways, and the ways are quite different, are attractive soft power and smart power models. So we share a lot of common ground. Let me talk a little bit about the thinking behind the Middle Powers Initiative from our perspective. For Australia, we see ourselves living in a period of great flux in the international environment. Power centres have become more numerous, more diffuse. Think of new consequential players like China, like India, Brazil, who are gaining increasing power and authority, while many established powers such as the US, EU, Japan are arguably experiencing periods of slower growth. There's also the role of non-state actors and cross-border information technology. All these things have impacted on the role of nation states. Within this framework, as active middle powers, we find our interests converging. We share a common experience of navigating between our strong relationships with the established powers and our growing economic and trade ties to the emerging major powers. We also face similar challenges, many of them new, requiring new ways of thinking, promoting the stability and prosperity of our regions, and tackling global issues such as climate change and non-traditional security problems, transnational crime, unregulated people movements, food and energy security and cyber security, amongst a long list of international issues requiring attention. And of course, as I said, we share a core interest in safeguarding a predictable, rules-based international order and promoting multilateral activity. But the international environment in which we try to do this is becoming more contested, and the practices and principles underpinning the international order are coming under challenge. It is becoming much harder to achieve results through multilateralism. But effective multilateral organisations also ensure smaller states and middle powers like Australia, the ROK, Turkey, Mexico and Indonesia retain a strong voice on the issues that matter to us and provide us an opportunity to come together to resolve differences in a constructive way. We can share and test innovative ideas for tackling global challenges, and then we can promote them more widely. There's no point in having this forum. There's lots of discussion about why we should have such a forum. There's no point in having such a forum unless we have an agenda and unless we make a difference. We can discuss ways to strengthen regional institutions like this UN Security Council, look at its working methods, how we might embed the G20 as a core international institution, how we can get progress out of the WTO. And cooperation, we believe, should be approached through a spirit of inclusiveness. Let me make an important point about how we see this MIKTA grouping. We believe it should remain an informal and flexible consultative group. We do not believe that it should create an institution or a bureaucracy or risk becoming an exclusive non-G7, non-BRICS bloc. Informality, I think, and openness to others on an issue-by-issue basis, in our view, is the way to go. We should not aim to agree to joint positions in advance of international forums, but we should seek to catalyse constructive movement on key issues. As last week in the previous forum, our Indonesian colleague Rizal Sukma said, we need to move beyond chit-chat. It's not just another talk shop, it needs to be able to demonstrate that it does something. So what should it discuss? That's yet to be determined, but there are some topics that could be proposed to guide discussions. But we should not be too prescriptive about this, I think. The role of middle powers in promoting multilateralism, looking at the working methods of the United Nations Security Council, for instance. Are there better ways of doing things? Closing development gaps and enhancing effectiveness of regional institutions, and looking at ways in which we can better address global challenges like building a consensus on approaches to climate change and non-traditional security problems like food security and cyber security. So foreign ministers may well want to consider some of these issues when they next get together, and look at how their joint, considerable joint persuasive power can best be deployed. We believe that this grouping brings together 5 countries that are strategically located with strong trade, economic, political and people-to-people links within their regions. They're substantial economies, but on their own they can't effect significant change globally. We're important in our own regions and we're increasingly influential internationally, but through MIKTA we're trying to build a broader coalition to drive forward global responses to global problems. I think we would be open to the idea of including other countries in this initiative in future where they're like-minded and where they would add value. But first, I think we'd like to see regular meetings of MIKTA itself bedded down and cooperation within this grouping shown to deliver something before we think about widening it further. The idea of including additional countries in discussion on particular issues has been raised, and we see merit in this around building consensus around solutions to particular challenges and emphasising the inclusive nature of the initiative. In the last couple of days in this town there's been discussion of the separate effort on constructive powers, a constructive powers initiative. These are not mutually exclusive, I think, and I think the MIKTA grouping should remain flexible enough to working with others on an issue-by-issue basis. Unfortunately, I will have to leave at 4:30, and I've been given a list of questions by people here in this room, but I hope that some of what I've said today will help to have answered some of those questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you again to Excellency, and I understand you have another the engagement today. And then finally, I'll ask Professor Lee Dong-hee from our institute, as a representative of Ifans. Professor Lee Dong-hee will in fact summarize and all of the discussion so far and present his the overall the analysis and assessment and wrapping up. Thank you.
예, 감사합니다. 저는 한국말로 하겠습니다. 여러분들 편하시죠? 예. 우선 뭐 저 앞에 네 분이 훌륭한 말씀을 해주셨기 때문에 저로서는 굉장히 편한 부분이 있고, 또 한편으로는 약간 더 보완됐으면 좋겠다 하는 부분이 있어서 그걸 중심으로 말씀드리고 한국의 중견국 외교 관련해서 조금 첨가하고자 합니다. 우선 왜 이 시점에서 중견국 외교인가? 아까 장관님이 말씀하셨습니다마는 투키디테스 시대로부터 토마스 아퀴나스, 그리고 또 냉전 시대에 이르기까지 중견국 외교라는 미들 파워 디플로머시란 말은 역사 이래 쭉 쓰여왔습니다. 근데 왜 지금 이 시점이냐? 라는 질문이 드는데 저는 거기에 대해서 이렇게 좀 설명하고 싶습니다. 우리가 지금 목도하고 있는 세계화 때문에 새로운 문제와 새로운 액터들이 나왔습니다. 그것이 새로운 중견국 외교를 필요로 하는 하나의 필요 조건을 형성했습니다. 근데 또 한편으로는 냉전 이후에 새로운 어떤 힘의 분포가 생기고 있고 그것을 우리는 G2라는 대표적인 말로 보고 있습니다. 이러한 힘의 분포 변화는 바로 새로운 중견국 외교가 필요한 어떻게 보면 충분 조건을 형성하고 있다고 보입니다. 자, 이러한 조건 하에서 결국은 기존에 있던 질서가 어떤 면에서 흔들리게 되고 그 질서를 새로 만들어야 하는데 질서를 유지하고자 하는 힘이 있을 것이고 질서를 변경시키고자 하는 힘이 있을 것입니다. 여기에 바로 중견국 외교가 하나의 틈새를 노릴 수 있는 여지가 생겼다는 것이 중요한 포인트라고 생각을 합니다. 자, 두 번째는 아까 자마두 교수님이 잘 지적을 해주셨는데요. 중견국이 중견국 외교를 하고 싶어 해도 강대국들이 원하지 않으면 안 되지 않느냐는 질문이 있었습니다. 맞습니다. 근데 저는 이제 일단 미국을 중심으로 말씀드리면요. 미국이 없이는 어떠한 문제도 못 풀지만 그러나 미국만이 풀 수 있는 문제도 이젠 없습니다. 따라서 미국도 어떤 경우로든 여타 국가의 협조를 원하는 상황이 되어 가고 있습니다. 그러한 시점에서 소위 말하는 중견국은 기본적으로 미국에 대한 동맹국이거나 미국과 가치를 공유하는 우호국들입니다. 그래서 중견국들의 역할이 있을 수 있다 저는 그렇게 생각을 하고요. 중국을 비롯한 브릭스 국가의 입장에서는 그럼 어떻게 봐야 되느냐. 자, 브릭스 국가 간에 말이죠. 좀 죄송한 말입니다만은 소위 말하는 남남협력을 시도하고 있습니다만은 이것이 의미 있게 진행되려면 상당한 시간이 필요합니다. 또 브릭스 국가들 소위 그 현상 변경을 하고자 하는 국가들이 지역 협력을 통해서 뭔가 이루어 보려고 하는 노력도 있을 수 있습니다. 그러나 미국이 나프타를 형성함으로써 소위 말하는 Threat of Regional Exit, 지역을 이용한 threat 전략이라는 건 미국과 같은 강대국일 때만 가능한 것이고 다른 국가들로서는 아직도 regionalization effort를 가지고 세계적인 흐름을 막기는 어렵습니다. 따라서 브릭스 국가들도 제3의 어떤 알터너티브로서 미들 파워 컨트리들하고의 어떤 협력이 저는 필요할 것이다. 이렇게 보고 있습니다. 자, 그럼 한국은 그럼 미들 파워의 어떤 역할은 뭐 어떤 것이 있을 수 있느냐 아주 간단히 말씀드리겠습니다. 이미 다 나왔습니다. 저는 첫째는 아젠다 세터, 의제를 설정하는 역할이 중요하고 두 번째는 캐탈라이저, 이런 문제들을 어떻게 보면 터뜨리고 끌고 가는 힘, 그리고 가장 중요한 건 저는 이노베이터라고 봅니다. 중견국이란 결국 나우리치, 새로운 개념의 중견국은 나우리치를 베이스로 하고 네트워킹을 기재로 하는 힘이기 때문에 현상을 타파하기 위한 또는 현상을 개선하기 위한 이노베이션 쪽에 초점을 맞춰야 됩니다. 그래서 저는 글로벌 거버넌스 이노베이터가 미들 파워에 적격한 역할이라고 봅니다. 자, 그럼 한국은 어떤 자격을 가지고 있느냐? 저는 이 세상에서 한국만큼 중견국의 자격을 갖춘 나라는 없다고 생각합니다. 자, 보십시오. 우리는 선진국의 문턱에 가 있습니다만은 선진국도 아니고 그렇다고 해서 디벨로핑 컨트리도 아닙니다. 결국은 중진국입니다. 경제적인 측면에서. 국가의 사이즈로 볼 때 거대 국가, 빅파워도 아니고 소국, 스몰 파워도 아닙니다. 미들 사이즈드 컨트리입니다. 중급 국가입니다. 그리고 지금 진행되고 있는 어떤 국제 질서와 관련해서 우리가 현상을 반드시 유지해야 되는 입장도 아니고 그렇다고 해서 무조건 현상을 변경해야 된다고 요구할 입장도 아닙니다. 그래서 중도 국가입니다. 자, 이러한 자격 조건을 갖춘 나라가 과연 있을까요? 거기에 덧붙여서 우리는 유라시아 컨티넨트와 아시아 퍼시픽이라는 머리타임을 연결할 수 있는 연육교적인 위치에 있습니다. 그리고 더 중요한 거는 우리는 동양의 문화와 서양의 문화를 융합할 수 있는 중요한 위치에 있고 그것은 이미 한류라는 현상으로 나타나고 있다고 생각을 합니다. 자, 그럼 이제 마지막으로 저는 한국의 외교와 관련해서 간략하게만 말씀드리고자 합니다. 저는 한국 외교의 중견국 외교는 두 가지 차원에서 중요한 역할을 할 수 있다고 보는데요. 하나는 기본적으로 한국 외교의 지난 50년간의 숏커밍, 부족했던 부분을 중견국 외교가 어떻게 보면 보충할 수 있다고 봅니다. 첫째, 분단 때문에 우리는 항상 한반도 문제에만 초점을 맞추어 왔는데 중견국 외교를 통해서 우리는 좀 더 지역적이고도 글로벌한 차원의 초점을 맞춰야 된다고 생각합니다. 두 번째, 남북 간의 대립 현상 때문에, 그리고 그것은 어떻게 보면 군사적 대립이었기 때문에 우리는 늘 군사적인 안보 문제만 생각했습니다. 그러나 미들 파워 디플로머시를 통해서 우리는 새로운 이슈들, 경제 플러스 이슈들을 다뤄야 합니다. 그리고 세 번째는 분단되고 대립되어 있었기 때문에 군사적으로 우리는 미국과 한국 간의 US Korea Alliance에 많은 방점을 두어 왔습니다. 앞으로 우리는 그것을 바탕으로 하되 좀 더 바이래터럴한 양자 관계보다는 다자적인 측면을 가야 됩니다. 이런 것들이 한국 외교의 혁신인데 바로 중견국 외교가 Regional Perspective, Global Perspective, 그리고 New Issues and Multilateralism 이런 걸 통해서 한국 외교의 21세기로의 전환, 트랜스포메이션을 가능하게 하려고 생각을 합니다. 지금 당장 박근혜 행정부는 이미 장관님께서 말씀을 해주셨습니다만 세 가지의 필러를 가지고 있습니다. 첫 번째, 한반도 신뢰 프로세스와 관련해서는요. 자, 무엇이 핵심입니까? 한반도 신뢰 프로세스에서 가장 큰 과제는 여하의 중국과 미국의 협력을 유도하느냐에 있습니다. 한국은 중견국으로서 바로 미국과 중국의 어떤 이익 구조를 하모나이즈하는 하모나이저의 역할을 할 수 있다고 봅니다. 두 번째, Northeast Asian Peace and Cooperation, 동북아 평화 협력 구상에서는 뭐가 장애입니까? 우리가 지금 목도하고 있습니다만은 우리를 뺀 두 나라 간의 문제, 또 우리도 약간 결부되어 있습니다만 소위 말하는 민족주의 문제입니다. 자, 우리가 중견국 외교를 통해서요, 이러한 국가들 간의 컨실리에이션, 컨실리에이터, 화해자의 역할을 저는 할 수 있다고 봅니다. 그리고 세 번째, 미들파워 자체는, 미들파워 디플로마시 자체는 글로벌한 차원에서 가능하면 현상을 변경하는 국가들과 현 변경을 원치 않는 국가들 간에 중간에서 커뮤니케이터 역할을 함으로써 활동 영역을 넓힐 수 있다고 생각합니다. 즉, 미들파워, 한국에 있어서의 미들파워는 하모나이저 역할을 함으로써 한반도 평화, 한반도 신뢰 프로세스를 증진시키고 또 컨실레이터의 역할을 함으로써 동북아 평화 협력 구상을 촉진하며 그리고 글로벌한 차원에서는 좀 더 소통자의 역할을 충실히 함으로써 현상 변경과 현상 유지의 그 틈새 속에서 우리의 행동 방향을 발견할 수 있다고 봅니다. 자, 이제 마지막으로 저는 이렇게 말씀드리고 싶습니다. 제가 말씀드린 대로 우리 한국의 중견국 외교는 한국적 시각과 글로벌한 시각을 융합을 해야 되고, 그리고 트래디셔널한 전통적인 안보 이슈와 새로운 어떤 threat, 새로운 위험 요소들을 다루어야 하고, 또 바이래터럴 어프로치에 덧붙여 가지고 멀티래터럴 어프로치를 해나가야 됩니다. 자, 이건 뭡니까? 이건 바로 컨버전입니다. 융합입니다. 그리고 이러한 융합을 바탕으로 이미 말씀드린 대로 글로벌 가버넌스를 위한 이노베이터, 이노베이션을 위한 그 아이디어의 산출 장소가 되어야 된다고 생각합니다. 이렇게 보면 한국의 중견국 외교는 컨버전스, 융합을 바탕으로 그 위에서 이노베이션을 추구하기 때문에 저는 한국의 중견국 외교는 바로 창의력을 필요로 하고 있고, 이에 따라서 저는 감히 한국의 중견국 외교는 다른 말로 말하면 창조 외교일 수 있다. 저는 그렇게 말하고 싶습니다.
Thank you, Professor Lee. And he was very functional. And I could extract common elements among all the presentation of the panelists. And the key words could be multilateral approach and coalition or networking, whatever. And new issues and creativity and innovation and new areas. So I think the most important element in middle power diplomacy is making some coalition and exploring new frontier of our diplomacy. And now we have about 15 more minutes for a roundtable discussion. So I think all the panelists feel there is some shortage of time, pressed time. So I would like to again give all the panelists about a couple of minutes, 2 to 3 minutes to wrap up. Or what point, if you have any point to particularly stress, emphasize, and so I would ask one more round, as 2 to 3 minutes each, please. And, yeah.
Well, I mean, I think the things that I did not cover was covered by the other panelists. So it might be a better idea from my side if we gives more time to the audience. Thank you.
Also, we were planning to some sort of internal discussions, comment or questions each other among the panelists, but because of time limit, then just a comment or the wrap up for several minutes.
Right. I'll be very brief. And I also found a great deal in common along the various presentations. What I would like to add is that Mexico is currently holding, I don't know if the chair or the pro tempore secretariat of this informal mechanism, MIKTA. The initial meeting was held, as was already mentioned, in September during the most recent General Assembly of the United Nations, and we will be holding early next spring another ministerial meeting, and we will be working along the coming months in order to deepen our collaboration and to work on some of the aspects that have already been mentioned as possibilities for common work for collaboration among MIKTA members. Thank you.
Dr. Jama, do you have anything to comment?
Okay, I want to underline the converging ideas in this symposium is that we have to conclude there are real needs out there for the middle powers or constructive powers to play in order to give positive contribution to the resolving of so many global issues. If we leave them to the great powers, great traditional powers, they might not be able to do that because of the power calculation, because of the the traditional competition of power politics, and middle powers like Korea, like Indonesia, like MIKTA cannot just sit indifferent in order to just to watch what is going on. And if we leave everything to the small states, they might not have the resources or willingness to deal with those problems. So middle powers have a very important role to play in order to fill the gap. And middle powers are in the best position to deal with these problems because of their extensive experience, like Korea has an extensive experience how to change from an agrarian country to industrialized country like this. You have a lot of things that you can contribute to the developing nations in terms of development cooperation that has become the title of our meeting over the last 2 or 3 days. So I think they have the real needs, and they have also the political will in order to contribute, for instance, through the forum of G20. You see that the middle powers are there, and they are the ones that we can rely on if you have the competition among great powers. They cannot solve the problems. Or in terms of regional stability, I think we have to acknowledge the role of the middle powers. Countries like Turkey, like Indonesia, they play very important role in their respective regions, and very well recognized also by the great powers. So you see, they have the role to play. The only problem now, how to consolidate this, how to strengthen the communication among them so that they might be on the same page to deal with the problems that are in front of us. I think we need to underline that, and we need to improve and to increase our networks, our cooperation in order to contribute positively to the resolving of so many problems in this era of globalization. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jamal. Mr. Ambassador, do you have any comments to add?
Thank you, Chair. In my view, and now I'm reflecting my own views rather than my government's, MIKTA will atrophy and will not be very effective unless it demonstrates that it's useful, that it adds value, and that it has influence. Hence, I think a lot of our talk so far has been why it's appropriate for all of us to get together. We've really got to look at what is it going to do. And I think discussion of setting up structures or principles or institutions is premature. We should keep this body informal and flexible at the start and look at where we can add value. Professor Jamoda has just mentioned the G20. That's an area I think where our interests perhaps sometimes diverge a little from those of the G8 or the BRICS group. We can our consultative power our shared interests there, I think, can make a difference. Although we won't always agree on everything either, and nor should we try to. I mentioned some others when I spoke before: cyber security, the whole transnational crime agenda, irregular people movements, aspects of climate change. I think it would be unrealistic to think that we can really shift the ground internationally too much on climate change, but there may be aspects of it where we can together, through our shared views, push forward somewhat. Development issues and development strategies and policies. The working methods, as I mentioned, of the United Nations Security Council, we all know at times it can be effective, but very often it's not. We could even think about opening up discussion again about whether its membership is representative and whether it should be changed over time. We're all free traders in the MIKTA group. We should look at where we can contribute to the free trade agenda, where there's an impulsion sometimes internationally, particularly at times of economic difficulty, to revert back to trade protectionism. We should resist this internationally and be a strong voice for the benefits of free trade. Unless we do this, unless we quickly develop an agenda and show we make a difference, then probably this whole initiative won't be very worthwhile. Thank you.
And before Professor Lee making the final comment, I understand Dr. Akhgunai has the former ambassador has a brief question to incumbent ambassador.
Ambassador, thank you very much for this insight. Actually, yesterday and today we were at a meeting of the Constructive Powers Initiative here. And this Constructive Powers Initiative was started in 2011 among a couple of colleagues in Ottawa. And we had a similar agenda in front of us, or criteria in front of us. And however, we ended up having some 13 countries to invite. Some of them are G20 countries, including Canada, ours, Brazil, and so on. But there are a couple of non-G20 countries. They are all democratic, economically developed, engaged in the domestic, regional and global issues against the proliferation issue, etc. so forth. Do you foresee that MIKTA has the possibility to include non-G20 members? And do you think that if we can have, for example, Canada, which is not a P5, be included in MIKTA, that will be acceptable from a political point of view?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. Australia, of course, has no objection. We're very close to Canada. We work very closely with Canada and others. The reason I think why we didn't look to Canada as an early member of the group as such was that Canada is a member of the G8. It has already a similar sort of grouping to which in some ways could work in the same way MIKTA could. It has a natural constituency there. It has a NAFTA association with both Mexico and the United States. As I mentioned before, Australia and Korea, we don't really have any, we're not members of ASEAN, we're not members of the EU, we're not members of the G8 or whatever. So we do share a lot of interests, and the MIKTA membership brings together a similar group of people with similar shared interests. But our view is this should be on an issue-by-issue basis. If it was important and useful to bring in Canada or non-G20 members, with our countries that really meet the criteria of having some weight, having some influence and shared values, then I think we're absolutely open to that, particularly on an issue-by-issue basis.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Then finally, Professor Lee.
Yes, 예, 매우 짧게 하겠습니다. 우선 한국의 어떤 앞으로의 중견국 외교의 패스에 대해서 제 의견을 말씀드리면 저는 이건 3층 위로 돼야 된다고 봅니다. 제일 밑바닥에는 한편으로는 국가 간의 어떤 협의체 MIKTA가 있어야 되고 또 한편으로는 상당히 다양한 부류의 프로페셔널들이 같이 참여할 수 있는 Constructive Powers Initiative와 같은 그런 민간적인 1.5 트레이 같이 나가야 된다고 봅니다. 두 번째 단계는 글로벌한 차원에서 G20에서 어떤 MIKTA의 어떤 역할을 좀 확대할 필요가 있고 또 한편으로는 글로벌한 차원에 덧붙여가지고 리저널한 차원, 즉 지역 차원에서 EAS가 돼도 좋고 또 다른 어떤 포럼이 돼도 좋겠습니다만 지역 어떤 협력의 장이 어떤 면에서는 중견국 역할의 장이 될 수 있도록 해야 된다 이렇게 생각을 합니다. 그리고 이제 가장 최종 단계로 보면은 결국은 소위 말하는 G7으로 대변되는 현상을 유지하는 어떤 힘과 또 브릭스로 대변할 수 있는 현상을 변경하고자 하는 힘 사이에서 중견국들이 글로벌한 차원에서의 어떤 중재적 역할, 소통자의 역할 이런 것들을 해야 되지 않느냐 이렇게 생각을 합니다. 한 가지만 말씀드릴게요. 한국은 G20 뉴클리어 세큐리티 서밋 같은 걸 통해 가지고 상당히 이제 멀티래터럴리즘에 많이 이해를 가지게 되고 접근을 하고 있습니다. 지금 G20은 그 자체가 위기 관리 어떤 그룹으로 시작을 해가지고 점차 상설화된 국제 문제의 관리 메커니즘으로 가야 되는데 여러분들이 아마 아시다시피 2, 3년 전부터 서울회의 이후 멕시코까지는 잘 됐습니다만 그 다음부터는 약간 정체 상황을 보이고 있습니다. 여러 가지 이유가 있겠습니다만 어쨌든 그런 정체 상황을 돌파하고 위기에선 어떤 면에서는 교차로에선 G20를 좀 더 푸시하기 위해서는 MIKTA 또는 CPI를 포함한 중견국들이 좀 더 이노베이티브한 아이디어를 계속 투여하고 G20를 그런 방향으로 동조화시키는 그런 노력이 필요할 때다 그렇게 생각을 합니다.
Thank you, Professor Lee. We are exactly on time. It's 4:30 and we are on time. And before we proceed to question and answer session, I just briefly to give my own the interpretation. It's not the official the position of Ifans or KNDA. It's my personal point of view. And as far as the middle power diplomacy is concerned, I think three elements are really important. So 3 C's. It's not command, control, and communications. But I think the first C is the capacity or capability or caliber, or whatever, the capacity, capabilities of the certain state or a country. And second C is the commitment. And strong will is required to be a middle power, the country or the middle power. And third C I mean, I think it's some collective activity or coalition. So those C's are really important in middle power diplomacy.